All right, so we're diving in today. Getting into something I think a lot of us think about, and that's starting something new. That whole process of going from knowing absolutely nothing to mastering something. And you guys have sent in some really cool stuff. A lot of it's kind of centered on this idea that even the greats, the masters, the people we think of as experts, they were all beginners once, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely thought about that a lot. It's like we always see the finished product, right? We see the virtuoso pianist or or you know, the coding genius, but we don't really think about them, struggling through their first piano lesson or trying to figure out, just a basic like hello world program.
Yeah, totally. And actually, some of this stuff you sent over really highlights that. There's this one line, every master was once a beginner. Like, that's so simple, but it's kind of profound when you think about it. But what I'm really curious about is, what did those early days actually look like? I mean, did Mozart just like come out like composing symphonies?
I mean, that would have been pretty impressive, wouldn't it? But no, it doesn't really work like that. One of the articles you sent, it actually talks about how even prodigies need to practice like a lot. And it uses this example of chess grandmasters, and it turns out that on average it takes them like 10 years to reach that grandmaster level.
10 years. 10 years. I mean, wow. So much for, the overnight success stories, right? Like, it really makes you rethink, that whole talent myth. You know what I mean? Like, maybe it's not so much about, some kind of innate gift or, some people are just born with it. Maybe it's more about dedication and just putting in the work, over time.
Yeah, for sure. Dedication's huge. And the text also mentions, it talks about how those early years they're often filled with, well, to be honest, they're filled with some pretty terrible work, like early drafts that are just, a mess, wonky prototypes, if you're building something, performances that would make your ears bleed, honestly. This is part of the process.
Yeah, but how do you push past that? You know, I mean, if I'm spending hours and hours on something and it's still just awful, I mean, wouldn't that just be so discouraging? Like it almost makes you not even want to start in the first place.
Right. Yeah, no, I get that. It's definitely tough. But one thing that the text suggests is kind of shifting your focus. So instead of instead of aiming for perfect right away, which I mean, let's face it, that's impossible, right? Um what they suggest is aiming for like slightly better than yesterday, like just make little improvements but do them consistently. And those little improvements when you apply them over time, they really can lead to some big leaps.
So it's like building a wall, brick by brick. You lay one brick, then another, and no one expects that. That first brick is going to be the whole like masterpiece, right?
Exactly. That's a great analogy. Yeah. One quote that really stood out to me from the text was start now, improve later. And it's like it's giving you permission to be bad at first, to embrace those early stumbles because they're part of the learning curve. You got to go through that to get to the good stuff.
Right, right. No, that makes a lot of sense. But okay, so let's say you're ready to start. You're ready to embrace the suck. Um, what about picking what to start? Like how do you choose? Because I know sometimes like I just get overwhelmed by all the possibilities. It's like I want to learn everything, but I can't. So how do you narrow it down? Any advice there?
Yeah, well the text it doesn't get too specific there, but it did touch on how important intrinsic motivation is, So choosing something that you genuinely enjoy doing, even if you're not good at it yet, that's going to make the whole journey a lot more sustainable. You're going to be more likely to stick with it if you actually enjoy it.
Okay. Passion over perfection. I like that. I like that a lot. So, I guess to kind of wrap things up here, what would you say is the big takeaway from all this stuff we've been talking about?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that even the masters, the experts, the people we admire, they were all beginners once. And the journey to mastery, it's a long game. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon, and it's built on small, consistent efforts and a willingness to embrace those messy early stages, the stumbles, the mistakes, the bad drafts, whatever it is. Those are all part of it.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And to leave you with a thought, what's that one thing you've been putting off? That skill you've always wanted to develop, that thing you've been saying, like, oh, I'll get to that someday. What's one tiny step that you can take, like right now, today, to just get started? Because, hey, even Mozart, right? He had to plink out his first notes before he could compose a requiem.